Good morning, class. This is Mr. Shakuri, your instructor for the module Payroll Administration as a part of Accounting and Payroll Administration program. I have mentioned over here that my email, okay, shakuri@nacollege.com. I have given my cell phone in case of emergencies. Please only call if you cannot get through me by email. Mostly I will be very quick on my email response. Now this module is of about 80 hours length, 4 weeks, and it will be covering the overview of payroll accounting, look at both provincial and federal legislation. We will learn CPP, EI, income tax and other requirement of the payroll. The textbooks will be using would be Introduction to Canadian Payroll Administration. This is the title of that, and you guys can get from online. We have some of the stocks in the college, but getting that would be an issue. So I will strongly advise that you guys can order by your own means. It could be a good resource, and I'll highly recommend that that you should have it. Okay. Now basically the method of evaluation as it was submitted to the ministry at the time of approval this program was 2 quizzes, classwork was of 10, assignment 3, and final examination is 1. There may be a little bit of change that we have to adjust the pattern that how we will conduct that, and but what will happen is that after each recorded lecture which will be sent to you guys, there will be a quiz, a review, and on the basis of those reviews after 1 week we can gather from those reviews some of the quizzes, and I will suggest to you some of the classwork, class assignment which you will be doing from home and submitting, and some of the assignments, but we will let you know, and there will be a final examination. The pattern still has to be decided with the change on online conducting these classes. All right. So this is the book that we'll be using, and these are the PowerPoint slides for that. I give a little bit overview over here that the Canadian Payroll Association has a program for the certification of payroll, and there is the first requirement for that certification is a payroll compliance practitioner, which is PCP. And after that, if you opt to, after 1 year's experience, people can go for this exam. If they have already, then they can enroll early. The content that we will be covering in this module basically will cover all the content which is required to pass this PCP first exam if you want to, and that was the reason that we adopted exactly the material which is good enough for the certification exam for PCP. And if you want to learn more about that, you guys can go over on Canadian Payroll Association. They have put into the process for how people can be in that role. I suggest those people, they may have a background in back home or human resources or some way in payroll. There is a good chance that they can use that skill set and enhance later on in their career if they choose to. All right. Now I would like to put some emphasis that what is happening over the year, sometime to the organization it costs more to have a payroll department in the company, in the organization, and they may find a much cheaper option by some of the company they only doing a payroll and human resources management. In Canada, basically these both of the company has a presence in North America. Ceridian was the one that was a long time was in the market, and they do the payroll as a third party for many organizations, and ADP is another one, very strong candidate and very competitive prices with them. So what people can do that mostly if there is a payroll every week or after fortnightly, mean that every 2 weeks, frequency is much more. People don't want to print all the check, online deposit should be there, then they can go to this option. So then jobs in the organization may be less, but again someone has to deal with the data submission to these companies, though it is very easy because they set up the system. They set up the system in such a way that only changes of the payroll, particularly if there are employees in the organization, they are on the annual and monthly basis salary, not much changes has to be done, except sometime when you are paying a vacation pay or other things. And in terms of hourly employees, what people do, that they just have to go to that portal, either ADP and Ceridian, everything will be set up. They just will change the number of hours, rate would be there. So, these companies help the organization initially on some cost basis or as a incentive that people should be joining their company for their payroll administration and payroll handling purposes. Then they can set up free, but once it's set up, really it is a kind of just changing the data, submitting as per their schedule, and the last day of the month when the company is or any date they select which day they want to pay to their employees, early morning 8-9 o'clock, money will go to their bank, and also they can see their payroll slips after 1 day or whatever the period defined, so that there would be less work for the company and the cost would be really very, very minimum. If you hire an employee, it may cost you $20,000 to $30,000 in a small corporation, like if he is doing some share work, and in this case it may be a couple of thousands only. So, I just want to give you the review. You guys can look into what Ceridian is, about ADP, but these are two big major player. Maybe there are many others, I have only come to know these ones, and in fact in our organization we are using ADP, and I am pretty happy about that. Now, the learning objective of this module is determine if an organization is an employer or has a contracted for services, which mean actually that you have to understand that whether your people working for you are their employee or they are contracted, okay, or self-employed. So, this determination has to be made when it comes to the employee and employer relationship. Then there are certain obligation which is called legislative or deemed deductions, or doing something on behalf of the government that you are legally bound to do that, like we have to deduct their CPP, EI, income tax and those kind of things. We will come into that in detail later, but again the first objective is whether you are an employer or you just giving a contract to other people. The people who is working for you, what is their status? Is their employee or they are a self-employed? Okay. Explain the use of social insurance number. Social insurance number is a key. All the government databases are linked with this. So, we have to keep it safe. Only the purpose of identification will be used, or anything else the government ask us to do, like in the prospectus of as a student, when you guys getting your T22 the certificate for the fees paid for the exemption purposes, then now from this year government is requiring that we should put enter a social insurance number into that certificate for the purpose of tax exemptions and stuff like that. Okay. Next is that determine if an organization is impacted by federal and provincial employment legislation. Wherever your organization is, federally or provincially, whichever the province is, once there is a employee and employer relationship, we have to look that what are we required to compliance with the legislation of that particular province or the territory. Understand the stakeholder in the payroll process, which means that who are the stakeholders, right? The employee, that the human resources department, the government, where we send those deductions and stuff like that. We will cover in detail. That was the overall objective of this. Now, as far as introduction of this course is concerned, payroll costs are significant, basically often the single largest operation of the cost of a business is employees and the payroll cost. and the next may be the rental cost with many other things. So, it is very much required that there should be an efficient payroll administration in the business. Okay. Payroll professional must ensure that all employees are paid accurately, on time, okay, and all the legislative compliance requirement are met. So, that is very important. Okay. Then contractual obligation are fulfilled with the employees and the third parties like insurance and those kind of things. Okay. So, we will cover these into details as they come into the slides. Now, before we pay, we must address three basic questions actually, and those questions are: is the worker an employee or they are contracted or a self-employee? Okay. If they are an employee, does federal and provincial jurisdiction apply? Okay. Jurisdictions apply on that. Okay. So, I just put a pronunciation stuff if someone want to have a jurisdiction that the legally you are bound to do certain thing in those provincial or territories. Okay. Who are the stakeholder in the process? What are their needs? Okay. So, what they required from you? So, these are the things we must address, the basic question. Okay. Now, this chapter is a little bit easy, is an introductory chapter, right? Where we will cover quite a bit things in coming slides and in coming days basically, and you guys will be proficient on doing a medium size payroll administration things. We must determine if there is an employee and employer relationship. In the Quebec, they have a certain, like as I mentioned, that legislative requirement are different in different provinces. If yes, the employer is obliged to do CPP, Canadian Pension Plan, employment insurance and income tax contribution, right? That we deduct from the employee. We will tell you how, when we have to pay employer's contribution and a premium. If you have a employee, you deduct from the withhold, mean deduct from the your employee, and also there is a contribution of CPP and EI required by the employer. We talk about that later. And then remit deduction and employer to the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, and there is certain rules that whether it has to be on the first week or after before and of the 15th of the month. If there is a holiday, then is go to the following, but we will talk about that. If someone does not do that, there is a penalties on these things, and we will discuss in a due course. Now, look at the basically what happened is that there is a one term which is called look at the substance of the relationship. Okay. So, what degree of control does the payer have over the workers? Like when we determine basically whether this person is a employee or self-employed, who provides and owns the tools? Okay. So, that is very important. Does the worker have an option to hire assistant or subcontract work? All those things will tell us whether this person is an employee or the self-employed. I just explained a little bit substance here. Substance or obligation of a contract embraces all the rights and liabilities that result expressively or implied from the agreement and the understanding of the parties, everything within the view of an intention of the party when they enter into the contract. So, when they define the contract, what is their intention? A person will be doing what? So, on the basis of that, what we agreed about that will consider whether the person is an employee or the self-employed. Okay. Now, in continuing the contractor, the employer for services mean the self-employed, look at the substantial relation, what degree of the financial risk does the worker bear. Okay. So, that is also very important. Okay. Whether if there is a loss, whether that person is liable for loss as employee, usually we do not, right. Does the worker have a responsibility to invest in the business in the need of that? Does the worker have an opportunity for additional profit? Okay. So, to what degree is the worker integrated in the operations? Mean that how if a self-employed person posing himself doing certain things in such a way that look like that he is managing the businesses, right, or maybe there are businesses which is integrated in such a way that they comprehend something different, like integrated operations is term used to define a company that combine two or more operations or division and operate as a single business unit. Okay. This collaborative method of conducting business offer cost saving and increase efficiency, but if some company is a part of your company like that, then those people are not acting as an employee, but they are self-employed, they are contractor. Okay, because then they will operate differently. We will discuss these things in due course. Now, Canada Revenue Agency and Workers Compensation Board look at the substance of the agreements and not simply the contract. Sometimes what happens is that maybe we say this person is a self-employed, and later on the Revenue Canada basically come their own explanation that no, this person is not a self-employed, is an employee. Or sometime when we say if a person apply for employment insurance benefits and they say no, you are not eligible, even though you are thinking that you are employee, but you are seems to be a self-employed because the employer does not have any control on you. You can work with your own schedule whenever you like, and those kind of stuff. Okay. So, now this is a good reading I put. The degree of control that a pair exerts over the performance of the worker is considered, okay, if the worker perform a job function without supervision or direction that would be appropriate for an employee, then it would be indicative that they are self-employed. Like if a person is working by himself, no direction is required, just complete their task. On the other hand, if the follow prescribed hours of a work, like someone, okay, 9 to 5, supervised by the employer or someone who is their supervisor, or pay is set by the hours, how many hours you work, right, accordingly. These situations will indicate that this is an employee and employer relationship. A key element to consider is whether a pair has the right to exercise control over the worker's activity, whether or not the right is enforced on a job site. Okay. The provision of ownership of a tool, who bring the tool, whether the company give a tool to the worker or the worker bring his own tools. Okay. If a workers own most of the equipment that they use and are responsible for their repair, maintenance, insurance, okay, then they belong to them, and then they consider the self-employment status of that person. If most of the tools are provided by the pair or the company who accept the risk of the ownership, then employer and employee relationship exist. Another indicator to be considered is if the worker has an option to hire an assistant, okay, or to subcontract a work to another worker. If they can independently make this decision, okay, then it would be an indication of a self-employment. If a pair or the organization makes all the decision on hiring assistants or other worker, then it is an indication that is a employer and employee relationship. The degree of personal financial risk that the worker bears in performing the work is another indicator. Okay. A self-employed person typically has an expenses or other financial risk in performing the work. Examples may be cost of carrying liability insurance and have a fixed cost not reimbursed, like given back by the employer. Normally, if the employee pays some expenses on behalf of the corporation performing their duties, then it will be reimbursed, but in case of self-employed person it will not be. If the worker has a responsibility to invest in the business, okay, that is another thing, in the business premises or activity to do the work, okay, then indicate that is self-employment. So, what we are doing over here is that how we will establish that whether this worker is a self-employed or is a employee. All right. If a worker has an opportunity for additional profit or chance of reduced profit, additional profit, and so it's a profit sharing kind of concept, then the evidence of a self employment. Okay. And if payer, however, pays for services performed at a fixed rate per unit or time or production and reimburses the workers for any expenses paid on behalf of the payer, then the situation is indicative of an employer and employee's relationship. Now, the worker's degree of integration, I put this note more, actually it was not in the slide, but I go to the book and find some relevant material, so that you guys could have a better understanding. Okay. So, the worker's degree of integration in the operation of the payer is also consideration when you are determined whether this person would be an employee or the self employed. If a worker act and behave as an employee, then they will be assumed to be an employee. However, if they demonstrate independence of decision making and use of personal resources, then this may be indicative of self employment. Okay. So, these are the guidelines. All right. So, let us have an example to figure it out with an example whether this person is employee or it is an or he or she is a self employed. About J, right, here is a requirement. So, must work 10 hours per week, must work, directions are there, use equipment provided by the company, must meet site manager at start and end of each shift for instruction and inspection, must wear standard company work shirts, must comply with company safety practice. So, if all these things are exist, the status is an employee, not self employed. Now, the second work is ANIA, work as needed, to have their own schedule, provide he or she is providing necessary equipment by themselves, right, this worker. Work independently on whatever schedule meets the contract performance terms. Okay. Only they are considering the work should be done on time as per the term, how, when is not controlled by the employer or the company. Wears whatever she chooses, all right, does not matter. Okay. Must provide a worker's compensation clearance certificate and evidence of liability insurance. You know, the WSIB that people has to be covered if something happen in the performance, they have their own coverage. As an employee, the coverage is done by the company. So, it is considered as a self employed. All right. So, that was the example to figure it out, so that you can comprehend what we talk about in the previous slides. Now, this requirement of self and self employed and the employee in Quebec, these following framework has to be in mind. Examine the intent of the parties, whether this contract is intended toward employee or the self employed. Determine if the employment meet the definition of a contract of employment. Okay. The contract of employment should have certain consideration into it, and that should meet the definition of a contract. Okay. Compare the intention of the party to the contract to the actual working relationship. Very clear. What is the intent? What is the intention? Okay. What is the intent mean is something that is intended, purpose, design, okay, intention. The original intent of the committee was to raise funds, the act or effect of intending. So, in the contract people should talk about expressively what I will be doing, how I will be doing, who will be controlling me or not, whether I am independently doing certain things or not. All those things will be determined for the status, and sometime this matter goes to Revenue Canada and the legislative body or sometimes go to the court, particularly if someone is applying for the employment insurance, and the EI people, EI department said no, you cannot, because you are not employee, you are acting as a self-employed, right. And sometimes even Revenue Canada give their own direction that even though you are considering this person as a self-employed, but according to these tests, that according to the criteria that we have, he or she may be under employer and employee relationship, and then the proper deductions should be made to the third parties as well. Now, we briefly touch base on the use of a social insurance number. Each individual employee must have a valid social insurance number. Is very important, right? Now, personal account number with the government. This is the account that all databases of the people is controlled with. One of the significant number is social insurance number issued by Service Canada. May be temporary, first digit, if it is a temporary, it will be first digit will be 9. Okay, will have an expiry date, and we have to make sure that if we hire an employee and at the time of employment, we should know when the expiry date is and check those things later on. Right now, there is a validity of the social insurance number, and most of the software, either payroll related or the accounting software, in fact, or the income tax preparation software like tax prep or profile or others one, in terms of accounting software, QuickBooks, Sage 50 or Sage 300, whenever there is a requirement to put a social insurance number, if there is not a valid number, then it will not accept that. Okay, and valid mean that the calculation base of that. So, I will just give a little bit example that is not important, because nowadays software will do your job, but if you are interested into it, then this is the format of that, how to check whether they are valid or not, to calculate, right. Multiply each of the, so you select, like this was the 990101065 is, say, for a social number. So, how to determine whether this is a right by the formula, right and valid number? Multiply each of the second, okay, fourth, sixth and the 8 by 2, and I explain this over here. Okay. So, this was the social insurance number here, and then we multiply by each second, fourth, like second, fourth, sixth and 8. I put a small dot on top of it, you see here. Okay. All right, and then what we add the digit of the results in the step 2. Result was 118. Okay, 18 18, right. Then 2 means 02, 2 means 02. Okay, and again over here 6 multiplied by 2. So, I figure it out that the position of the digit second, fourth, sixth and 8 is 9, 1, 1 and 6. When we multiply by 2 is coming like this. 18 is the resultant of the first calculation, right. Then 2, then 2 and then 12. Okay. So, how we are adding the digit? 18 is 1 and 8, then 0 2, then 0 and 2, okay, and then 1 2, okay, which is mean 12 is 1 2, okay, and so the add all those numbers is become to 16. All right. Again, I don't put a lot of emphasis, but it will be good kind of exercise if you want to. Add the first, third, fifth and seventh digit in the social insurance number. Go back, and I highlighted this underneath. Okay. What we have to do here, add the first, which is 9, third, which is 0, fifth is 0 and seventh digit, which is 0. So, it means that add addition of that, right. Okay. So, what we do? So, total is 9. Now, add the result of step 3, which is step 3. Here this is a step 3. There is some arrow here. This is a step 4. Okay. Add the result of 3 and 4. The result of 3 is 16 and the result of 4 is 9. So, total we add here. So, this is step number 5 in fact. Okay. So, what we have to do is here that 16 is a step 3, right, and step 4 is 9, and when we adding it become 15. All right. Now, the last step, which is number 6 step, is we see subtract the result of step 5 from the next highest number ending in 0. A little bit tricky. So, we know that the value is 15, which in step number 5. Then after 15 you count 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We have to find the highest digit which end in 0, in this case is 20. So, we pick up this 20 right here and deduct it from the 15 and resultant is number 5 here. Okay. And that should be the last digit in the association number. In this case the association number last digit was 5. All right, and this is coming 5. This is a good exercises, and then you can add some stuff, and that's want to do it by yourself. Okay. All right, that was about calculating to know the validity of the numbers. Okay, whether the combination is coming right or wrong. Okay. Now, in terms of employer responsibility, employer must request within 3 days of an employee's start date. This could be an exam question or quiz question. Responsible for ensuring the privacy of the number, that they should keep it safe, not throw here and there in a safe file, whatever the system it is, only used to identify purposes for communicating with the government. Okay, should not be used for any other purpose by the employer. Okay. All right. So, now employment legislation jurisdiction. Okay. I just focus on what is jurisdiction mean, the official power to make legal decision and judgment in that federal or provincial jurisdiction, so that if you are operating a business in those jurisdiction, you will follow those rule regarding the payroll as well. So, payroll compliance rules differ based on the jurisdiction, which means that provincial and the federal. Okay. Business under federal jurisdiction must follow the Canada Labour Code. Business under the provincial jurisdiction must follow the provincial and territorial employment and labor standards. Federally regulated organizations are generally in certain industries sector like banking, radio, television, communication, transportation. Okay. So, these are more regulated bodies where they have to follow their legislation on top of other requirements. All right. Now, who are the stakeholder in the payroll process? Internal stakeholder, very visible, is like an employee, okay, business owners and the managers. External are CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, Service Canada, provincial government and financial ministers, that we send those receiver general, Ministry of Finance, certain deduction that we do, and third party like insurance companies and the courts. In terms of courts, sometimes there is a garnishment orders. What are the garnishment orders? I just put an explanation because many people may not be aware of that. Sometimes the court order and directing to the organization that please deduct certain money and send to the government. Particularly in our experience, it is happening when there is a custody and settlement between the families, then there is support, spousal support or the child support. Sometimes people do not pay their responsibility, they start at the beginning maybe, and sometime after that they do not do, or from the beginning they do not do, then the responsibility offices from those jurisdiction send a note to the companies, organizations, that they should deduct on behalf of the court or family responsibility offices, and then that is the garnishment, and business are must follow those rules, right. Now, there is a term you guys can read, the plaintiff, a person who bring a case against another person that, oh, this my spouse is not paying me this, and the person who is defendant is a person who has been accused for that. Okay. So, I just thought of that as a good term, plaintiff, then there is a defendant, okay, and then the garnishment in terms of our payroll point of view. All right. That is the also could be a third parties where we have to send those deductions accordingly. All right. Now, I added a few things for more clarification. There is a certain review questions at the end of the chapter. I thought of that, I can address that, so you guys can look into it. What are the criteria used to determine if a worker is an employee or independent contractor or self-employed? So, the following thing we discussed already, the degree of control, who provides the necessary tools, whether the worker can subcontract work to others or hire assistants, whether or not the worker has a financial investment in the business to perform the work, okay, the degree of financial risk that the worker has, if there is an opportunity for additional profit or reducing the profit, okay, and risk of financial loss in the performing the contract, right? The degree of integration of the work into the pairs organization, right. So, these are the stuff I in fact explained that, and it is very clear, I believe, to you guys. Now, what are the requirement of an employer regarding the collection and use of the social insurance number? As we mentioned, that the employer must receive a social insurance number from the employee within 3 days commencing of the employment, okay, or terminated employment if they cannot provide. Social number should be kept confidential and only used for communicating employees information to the government. If the social number starts with 9, then it is a temporary, and we must need to know when it will be expiring, and there is expiry extension to be with compliance of the payroll. What industries are covered by federal employment legislation? We talk about that. I just give a more explanation of this. Industry covered by federal legislation include banks, interprovincial marine, shipping, ferry and port services, air transportations, okay, railways, canals, pipelines, telephone, cable systems, radio and television broadcasting, uranium mining and processing companies, business dealing with the protection of fisheries and natural resources, many First Nations activities, most federal crown corporations, okay, and private business necessary to operate to the operation of Federal Act. All right. So, these are the list of that, and if you guys want, you can write it down, stop the video at that time. I explained that maybe for some people it may be a little bit what is the Canadian Crown Corporation. These are state owned enterprises owned by the sovereign basically of Canada, which means the crown, they okay, basically, okay. So, these are the state owned companies, okay, owned by the sovereign of Canada, and the crown mean they but that is the crown. So, that the government, okay. In terms that current sovereign of Canada is a queen, okay. The sovereign is represented in Canada by the Governor General, Lieutenant Governors and Territorial Commissions, okay. So, these are the Crown Corporation. They are established by Act of Parliament or Act of the Provincial Legislature and report to that body via Minister of Crown in the relevant cabinet. That's an additional information, you guys can Google it, but I thought of that giving you some site on it. All right. So, what will happen onward? A link will be, so I would like you guys to go over on it, make your own notes. I try to emphasize most of the stuff which was relevant in the chapter number first, and then we will send you a link via email to do the review of a chapter 1. And what will happen is that when you will do that review, answer those questions, you will know the right answer, as well as it will be submitted to me via the email, and that will be considered, that it will count as your attendance and compliance with the active participation policy when we are learning online or distance and alternative method of learning. Thank you very much, and I will be communicating through email more in coming emails, and we will conduct these lecture. I will also let you know that I will be doing some live lecture, either using WebEx account where you guys can log in and communicate and view and talk and chat, or through the Zoom. Okay, but it will be communicated. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.